Woo! Got a credit card. Which debt payoff method works best for you this week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show? Hey everyone, my name is Chris. Welcome to the Extreme Personal Finance Show. I'm joined by my friend Dan. Dan, how's it going, man?
Going pretty good. Pretty good. No
Wonderful.
complaints.
Yeah, so I just got back from a week in Florida
Oh, now I'm
and
complaining.
it was absolutely fantastic. And you know what I came back to? Negative temperatures and 10 inches of snow. So,
Yeah, well, that's what you get.
yeah, I know. Like literally the day I got back, I'm like, what is happening? Anyway, I spent a week in Cape Coral, Florida, and it was absolutely fantastic. I have a friend down there, and I had just such an amazing time. I was actually at a conference too. I'm going to provide some additional information later about the first ever unconference. This was a conference for a whole bunch of entrepreneurs that get together for all sorts of breakout sessions, everything from content creativity to real estate to, I mean, there were just masterminds for all sorts of different business facets. It was super fun and I learned so much from some amazing people. So it was awesome.
Why is it called the unconference though?
Yeah, because there wasn't a main stage speaker or like a keynote. So there wasn't like
Okay.
a presentation that you're speaking to like a large group. It's basically all breakouts. So it's like those valuable hallway conversations you typically have at the big conferences.
Hmm.
This is all those hallway conversations, right? So for instance, this was awesome. I met this one woman. I think her name is Lily, I think. So she's from there. She was one that was local, but people came from all over. Like it was awesome. But we started talking. I had casually talked about different things that we do. And I mentioned that, I have this podcast and a blog. And I also run an Amazon store. So I do sell stuff on Amazon. And this piqued her interest a little bit. And we ended up spending an hour and a half out in the hallway talking through the business model. She had done private label selling several years ago, importing inventory from China and selling it on Amazon as private label. And she was not very successful. It was really, really hard. It's hard to make any money unless you're buying thousands of dollars of ads so that your
Mm.
product shows up, among the thousands and thousands of products out there. Anyway, I had showed her my model, that people do with just online and retail arbitrage, buying already branded stuff. You don't have to buy ads. You buy stuff that's already selling. And it was awesome. We spent an hour and a half talking and I, brought up my laptop. I brought up the analytics tools. I brought up like showed her specific products I was buying, what the margins were. And afterwards, she's like, Chris, you could package this and sell this as a course for like $1,000. And I was like, what? She's like, well, I paid $1,000 a few years ago and didn't learn anything. And it was really cool. It was humbling to hear that. And so who knows, maybe I'll make some sort of course to help people get started and find profitable products to sell on Amazon. I don't know.
I'm gonna ask that you not because I don't want to lose respect for you.
I think if I did it, it wouldn't be $1,000.
I
Like that seems out of.
This is definitely like I'm a 70-year-old dude in a 40-year-old body. There's just like that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard selling a course online. I can't
Yeah,
get behind it.
I don't know. I don't know. It was maybe I'll resurrect the newsletter I did, right? I did, 20 different issues of this email newsletter. We had, I don't know, a few hundred people on the mailing list where I was helping people get started and find profitable products and how to overcome some of those challenges. And, I was doing that all for free just to help people. So maybe I'll bring that back. I don't know. Anyway, back to the back to the message at hand. So this week we're going to talk through different types of debt paydown methods. And I felt this was really important. I mean, you and I go to a monthly meetup group and we talk about different financial topics, different headlines, different scenarios. And again, it's one of those things where sometimes we forget that others may be hearing things for the first time,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I forget. I mean, even when I worked in tech, I would often forget, hey, you know what? Someone in the room maybe they don't know what that acronym means. Maybe they don't, have some of that baseline knowledge because you're just in it every day. And so we had brought up, specifically how to get out from under some debt, some consumer debt, like credit card debt. It was just I was reminded that, hey, you know what? Not everyone knows this. So let's break down some of these principles on different methods. So we're going to go through a few different methods here today. It's kind of crazy because credit card debt is still just absolutely insane. I think LendingTree has a current report that says total credit card balance now is almost like $1.7 trillion. I mean, that just makes me sad.
For sure. Yeah. And then I don't know. I don't know the numbers offhand, but we've kind of addressed that a little bit in some of the other topics that we've had. It's just like the Nvidia one a
Mm,
couple weeks ago, where it's like this is the largest ever. It's like,
right,
well, okay, it's a larger number. That
right,
$1 trillion is like, but I have heard that it is kind of higher, even as far as a percentage of GDP or some other metric
sure.
too. That's like it's not just that the trillion number is getting larger, but that even as a portion of what our national income
Mm,
is also creeping up there. So
sure. So what do you think of this then, Dan? So this report also stated that 47% of those people, they carry that balance month to month at an average interest rate right now of 22.8%.
oh, it's come down. As sad
Yes.
as that is.
So I don't know. I didn't grab like what the average balance is. I don't know. Isn't it
Sure.
like 7 grand or something? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's well, and then average or median?
Oh, good point. I don't know.
Because I feel like some people's situation is gonna skew that number one way or another. But I think something, and this isn't really the focus of this conversation, I guess, but would not be a bad idea to talk about at some point credit scores
Oh yeah.
and how that all is calculated. Because I know that there's a portion of the population that is still convinced or convinced for the first time because other people believe this that carrying a balance from month to month actually helps with your credit score, which it does not.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it just makes me wonder how many of those people that are carrying the balance are carrying three, four, $500 just because they think it's going to make their credit score go up 4 points, and which also, depending on how high it is, doesn't matter. So,
Right.
um, yeah, that'd be a good topic for the future.
Yeah,
Credit
let's do it.
scores.
Let's do it. Well, so this one, so one of the big things, let's say you're trying to get out from under some credit card debt. We got to start paying down our different types of debts that we have. Again, you might have student loans, you might have a car payment. And there's two main methods that we hear people throw around a lot. The first one is the debt snowball, right? The snowball method. And this is one that Dave Ramsey really kind of made popular. This approach it seems to work really well for people that need those quick wins to kind of stay motivated, to stay on track. So this is a method that you basically list all of your debts from smallest balance to the largest balance, regardless of interest rates. Okay. So you're paying attention to only the balances. And then what we do is we pay the minimum balance on everything except the smallest debt. This gets any extra money that we have in our budget until we crush that smallest bill, whatever that is. It could be a credit card, it could be a personal loan. Maybe you only, owe, a few grand on your car loan. It doesn't matter. We're looking at just the balance of that loan. So what are your thoughts? You seem to like the snowball method.
I like the snowball method. And should we talk about the avalanche method first, as far as what that is, and then compare contrast or why?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so avalanche is going to be where you look at all your debts and then you look at the interest rates associated with them. And so the ones that have that highest interest rate, that's going to be the one that you focus on first, regardless of regardless of what the payment is, regardless of what the balance is. It has the highest interest rate, so you're paying the most interest on that loan, and then subsequently the next highest, and so on and so forth. So you've got lowest debt, amount versus highest interest amount, Snowball versus Avalanche.
Yeah.
So for me, as you said, and as I agreed to, I'm a Snowball kind of guy. And the reason is, and it's not just the quick wins for me. It's also the fact that typically, if people are at a position where they're like, okay, I've had enough. I realize I need to fix this situation, and I've got debt, and I got to get it under control. I got to get it paid off. Their margin for error is very, very, very slim. It's just like they make X dollars and they spend every month X minus one,
Yeah.
or X plus one. They're right there at the edge.
Hmm.
And getting some of these smaller debts paid off gives breathing room. It gives
Okay.
a little bit of space to relax. So it's not just that, oh, I got that quick win. It's just that when next month comes along, something crazy happens and you've got an extra $7,500 expense that comes up. Well, you have that available to you because
You're
you
doing it.
got rid of a bill.
Sure. So you're doing it to kind of give you more margin, to give you some breathing
Exactly.
room. Yeah. So me in
Yep.
my head, when I first started my debt pay down journey, it was all psychological for me, right? It was like I, I needed those quick rushes of dopamine, as to
Yeah.
keep me motivated. And so I used debt paid on trackers. Like I made literally like a sheet that I would like put X's on for like every $500 that I paid down. And I had it literally on my fridge, right? So it was like that was keeping me motivated. A lot of people think the snowball method, where you're just paying the smallest debt first, is more of a psychological game, right? Where you can
Mhm.
win. But I absolutely understand that the Avalanche method, it makes sense with the math. Like the math makes sense.
Right. But so where I come down on that is like if you're actually somebody who's like, yeah, the math makes sense though, sure. But let's be honest with ourselves, right? And maybe you're someone who the math makes sense for and you've just not been paying attention and now you're paying attention.
Mhm.
But if that's not the case, the math made more sense to just not go into debt in the first place. So are you tricking yourself into thinking that, oh, I have to do it this way because the math makes more sense? And then 16 months later, you haven't paid off any debts entirely because
Right.
you've been chugging along at this one that has a higher interest rate. And now another expense comes up and you're like, oh, I still have all of these debts to deal with.
Yeah.
So and just kind of messing with around with some debt calculators and looking at it, it's case by case, I guess, but just kind of playing around and putting in, it's like, okay, if I had these three credit cards at this rate and this student loan and this car payment and whatnot, a lot of times doing the Avalanche method across 3, 4 years, you're paying $800 less interest by going the Avalanche method. So is that worth it? You saved $800,
Right.
but to not allow yourself in year one to free up that cash flow.
Interesting. No, that's a great way to look at it because I mean, I know that. Do you think that maybe the Avalanche method, am I saying that right? The Avalanche.
You say however you want to, man. It's all
I'm
good.
stuttering.
I know what you mean.
The Avalanche method would work better for maybe higher earners because they would have more, like they could, again, we're really not going to get into like true. I mean, you're going to have a budget in place. You're going to have to make sure you have money to toss at this, right? But
Sure.
the way
Yeah.
the way I look at it is, okay, if we look at the Avalanche method, it seems like I'm saying it wrong. The Avalanche method is like, let's say you have three debts. Let's say you got a credit card, personal loan, and a auto car loan, let's say.
Okay.
Well, your car loan is, let's say it, I mean, 5, 6%. Personal loan maybe like 10, 12%, but the credit card's like 22%. So if you start with the highest interest rate, you would have saved like $2,000 to jam that out first. Now, I like what you said though. I mean, it's going to take you time to jam that out.
Right. And just doing that comparison of like no doubt the Avalanche interest you'll pay less interest.
Hmm.
But you just have to look at how much less interest and is that worth the trade-off of potentially not feeling like you're making any headway for a longer period of time. And it's as we talk about with a lot of the things that we talk about, it's which one are you actually going to do?
Hmm.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. The one,
If you're gonna if I say, hey, do the snowball because it's better because of X, Y, and Z, but you don't do it, then it doesn't really matter. But if you'll do the avalanche, go for it.
right, right.
End result is more important than you know which method you choose.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I mean, the one you stick with is the one that works. There was another method, and I can definitely see how you can kind of put this. I think of it as kind of like a hybrid. You can kind of put this with the other methods, but this is something called the tsunami method. And I wasn't really that familiar with it until
Oh,
I
same.
started doing some research. And this is one where it looks at more of the emotionally driven approach that prioritizes debts based on like that psychological like impact it would have much more than any sort of math or numbers or balances. So let's say you got a loan from your parents and it keeps you up at night. Like, you owe your parents money, right? And it
Hmm.
may make sense to like pay that off first, regardless of how much interest they're paying you, regardless of what the balance is. Um, if there's debt that I owe to like family or friends or something, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and crush that out first. Maybe it's like medical debt, and again, interests can be really low, balances may not be as high or whatever. But
Hmm.
if it's tied to some sort of difficult time in your life, yeah, maybe you just want to pay that off because you don't want to think about it anymore. Like
Could be.
every time you
I,
think of that medical debt, you're like, oh, that was that time that it was a bad time in your life, right?
yeah, I could see that regarding specifically the medical debt one. Um, I don't know if this is 100% passed through or it's just on the books to get pushed. But I remember reading they are working towards, if they haven't done it already, medical debt, even if you're behind on it, it won't count against your credit score.
Correct. Correct.
So
Yeah, I have a
with
blog
that
post
one,
about it.
with that one, I could see, hey, I get how this makes you feel uncomfortable because it was a bad time in your life and it was a
Hmm.
very lot of weight to it.
Hmm.
But maybe let's prioritize these other ones that are going to have a greater impact
Sure.
on these different areas. I was actually thinking one might be like IRS debt, which you can do payment plans and whatnot. But
Yeah.
I don't know, just maybe I'm watching too many gangster movies or something. But the idea of having IRS debt out there is like, oh no, let's just
Yeah.
let's just get that done.
I think one thing that's really important to me that made sense, and I didn't even really know that I was doing it. Like, let's say it's a loan tied to like a failed business venture,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it kind of goes to like that sunk cost fallacy where you've already kind of done it. So I started this business venture back when I was, how old was I? 22, 23. And I borrowed $3,000 from my dad's friend. Like, I remember meeting him at Baker Square. I showed him a business plan and said, this is what I want to do. I was asking for 6 grand. He gave me three. And I remember, yeah, crashed and burned. And it was all I could think about was to pay him back the $3,000 that I borrowed because he was a family friend and I just didn't want to be in debt. Right.
Yeah.
So that's that tsunami method. And then we can take these methods and kind of make some sort of hybrid that makes the best of both worlds or three worlds or whatever that makes sense to you. That's kind of how I started. So you and I both, again, I like the snowball method. I used that at first. So back in 2015, 2016, when I got separated, then went through divorce, I was jamming through all my debt using the snowball method because I met famous Dave Ramsey, and that's how I got started. And then I think now that all my consumer debt was paid down using the snowball method, now I've switched to that Avalanche method for all my business stuff, right?
Mm.
So I have all my, because I have a bunch of real estate, I got mortgages and commercial loans that are at 3.5, 4.5%. But then I also have a line of credit on some stock at Morgan Stanley. Well, that's at 9%. So yeah, I'm starting to go to the highest interest first, if that makes sense. So I started with Snowball and then went to Avalanche. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Goodness. What are my thoughts? I think it's gonna depend on where people are at too. I think maybe in their personal finance journey, right? So starting off, if I was speaking with somebody and it's just their first time and they're still learning everything and getting all the basics under them and whatnot, I would introduce Snowball and Avalanche. I
Mhm.
wouldn't worry about a hybrid because that's starting to get in the weeds. I was like, well, let's make this a little bit more complicated. It's like, no,
Sure.
let's make this as simple as possible, right? And then just which one makes the most sense to you, Snowball, Avalanche, whichever one they say, it's like, all right, let's just focus on that. Don't worry about eventually I'll switch over to this or eventually I'll switch over to that, because, give yourself some credit there, Chris. I mean, you know a lot and you've been successful with a lot of stuff and you've gotten to a point where you enjoy thinking about this sort of thing and talking about it, whatnot. Some people
Sadly,
don't,
yes.
but some people don't
Sure.
want that, right? They
Yep.
just want to be secure in their finances and go to work and save some money and do their thing. So it's simpler is better and just doing the one that they're comfortable with and focusing on that and they're just not worrying about jumping back and forth between the two and
Sure.
figuring out which method works better. It's just keep it simple. It's like my overall mantra with finance. Just what's the simple thing? Do that.
Yeah. And I like looking at too, like starting with the snowball. And since you're starting with the smallest balance, I like keeping that momentum debt kind of in focus, right? So you'll see the end, like, oh, I can polish this off in 6 months, right? Or whatever that number is.
Right. Yeah.
Like to me, that keeps me motivated to know that and that's why I like crossing off the tracker because I could see the end getting closer.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah. So again, debt's not fun. We understand it, but you know what? Especially when we're just starting out. I mean, a lot of us have debt. What was the very first credit card you got, Dan?
The first one I got was a Discover card through Radio Shack, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
What'd you buy? Oh, audio
I'm
gear.
I'm no, no, I'm sure
Oh,
it was something stupid. Um, Might have been a computer,
okay.
compact maybe.
An
I don't know.
Amiga.
No, it was after that.
Okay. Okay. Right
It was
on.
after that. I'm not as old as you are. No.
That's right. That's right.
I'm close though. But no, yeah, it was a Radio Shack Discover card,
Okay. Okay.
2000, 25 years ago.
Yeah, I got my first credit card was a Dayton's.
All right.
So those of you that may remember Dayton's, it was a retailer here, like department store, and I bought like a $40 flannel shirt. It was so dumb. I think I was like 19 and I'm like, woohoo, got a credit card. And
Right? Yeah.
yeah. Um yeah, and also I remember I had moved out of my dad's place and I financed my first combo amp for my
Okay.
guitar.
Hmm.
And it was one of those things where I have no idea how I did it, but all I cared about was that I could make the $23 a month payment.
Right.
But I'm sure it was 25% interest or something. I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. If I could go back,
Yep,
if we could go
exactly.
back, it's like
Exactly.
I know my son gets, I'm sure he gets tired of it, but any opportunity I get to be like, do this, don't do that, please don't make the same mistakes that I
Yeah,
made.
right.
But he does seem to be catching on, which is a whole heck of a lot more than I could say when I was his age. So
That's great.
good kudos for him.
That's awesome. Thank everyone for listening. We really do appreciate it. If you're overwhelmed with that, it's okay, man. You'll get it. You can do it. figure out what method works best for you. You can start with that snowball method that worked for both of us, and hopefully you'll gain that margin you need, some breathing room, like Dan said, to just start crushing the next debt. And yeah, it'll be great. So please like, subscribe, follow wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We really would appreciate it. And you can always follow us on YouTube as well. And we will see you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. See ya.